Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a very important day today for anyone who is concerned about democratization of governance and indeed a society. The right to information is very closely connected with the idea of democracy, because the idea of democracy is governance by the people on behalf of the people, and it demands accountable government. Now, if people in whom sovereignty lies in a democracy do not have access to information that is held by public authorities that are important to public life, it means the accountability of government cannot be maintained at the highest level. So this is the reason why internationally it has been recognized that access to information is of the essence. So it is tied up with democracy. Now, I just want to speak a few words about this dimension of democracy. As we know, when we vote and establish an elected government, we are deemed to enter into a social contract with our elected representatives. So the elected representatives are given or transferred temporarily, provided with our sovereign authority to govern the country under various conditions. And one of the most important conditions is that governance will be conducted in a manner that will protect the rights, the human rights of the people. Now, early on, when the United Nations established this international human rights framework for the protection of the people of the world, one of the main rights that got great attention from the inception was freedom of expression. Because as we know, freedom of expression is the lifeblood, is the foundation of democracy. Without freedom of expression, we cannot really participate in governance. We really, cannot be democratic. We cannot live in a democratic system without freedom of expression. Now, if you look at the international, Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which was one of the first human rights treaties of the United Nations, it says that freedom of expression includes the right to, of course, express thoughts, ideas, and so on. And it also mentions, it includes the right to hold opinions and also receive information. So why is it? Because without information, we can't form opinions on public matters and also matters relating to our own lives. So, for example, we need to know about educational policies in order to enjoy right to education. We need information about healthcare systems in order to enjoy the right to health, and so on. So, right to information was guaranteed in a clause, Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which broadly dealt with freedom of expression. So all these rights are interconnected. So if freedom of expression is the lifeblood of democracy, that clearly points to the fact that right to hold opinions and access to information are equally very important. It's foundational. But for many years, member states of the United Nations, which subscribed to the UN Charter, which required all states to ensure the promotion and protection of human rights in their territories, paid attention to freedom of expression, but did not pay much attention to providing access to information to the people. And that there's a reason for that, because since the establishment of the nation state centuries ago, we think that it was the case in the 17th century and onwards that the idea of state sovereignty was so very strong. It also meant internally that governments had, had vast powers over the subjects. And so government was conducted in a very secretive manner. Actually, this Official Secrets Act, under which now, just recently, a few days ago, we find the government of Sri Lanka issuing a gazette notification declaring certain zones around the country, around the public institutions, to be protected high security zones, stems from one such laws that we inherited from the colonial past. Now, colonial authorities were very quick to have such, official secrets acts and so on, because the rule was in governance those days, secrecy. The exception was openness, but things have changed. Today, the rule is open government and the exception is secrecy. So certainly, I would say that this declaration of high security zones under the Official Secrets Act, in my opinion, is against the very law under which it was, these zones have been created. By the Official Secrets Act itself is something that we must question as those who wish to live in a modern democracy. So international law required from the inception, that is from the 1960s onwards, and recognized it as a universal right that people in a democracy have the right to access information held by public authorities. Now you will ask the question, is this something that the United Nations created on its own, this norm of right to information? I do not think so. Because for centuries, as systems of government evolved into democracies, what the people demanded mainly was accountable governance. And in that idea of accountable governance was this idea that governments must reveal everything to people. How do they take decisions? How do they make decisions? And in this day and age, where there's a great degree of monetary transactions and so on, where we see massive levels of corruption, and there are allegations of massive levels of corruption in Sri Lanka, and indeed in many other countries, right to information is of greater significance. And also the fact that today our personal information is probed and collected and are stored in various electronic devices. We also need to know what the government does with such information. So the list goes on about projects that are undertaken ostensibly in the public interest. Are they in the public interest? How did the government decide on such projects? Where do they get the money from? And how much is spent? How much is received? All those things are of great interest. But it's also about other issues. For example, admitting a child to school, admitting a student to the public university system. All these issues are of deep public interest. I only mentioned a few, but we know as people living in a country who are concerned about our rights, how important it is to receive information held by public authorities. So what we see is this demand, but as I said, while freedom of expression was guaranteed by the 1972 Constitution as well as 1978 Constitution, there was no mechanism for us to access access information held by public authorities. Of course, the 1978 Constitution in the freedom of expression clause did have a provision which said that right to receive information. And the Supreme Court also, in the famous Viswalingam case, pointed to the fact that freedom of expression includes the right to receive information. But there was no specific mechanism developed by the law to access information held by public authorities. This is why the 13th Amendment, the 19th Amendment is extremely important, because public agitated for greater transparency and accountability of the government, particularly the manner in which very important officers were appointed, because they have to serve the people in an efficient and satisfactory manner and so on. So the 19th Amendment introduced the right to information, recognized the right to information as a fundamental right, a specific fundamental right, which was included in Article 14 of the Constitution. So this was a landmark event in the protection of fundamental rights in the country. But by no means can one say that before the 19th Amendment, right to information was not protected. It was protected by the Constitution as recognized by the Supreme Court. But the point is, no mechanism was established for people to actually apply for and obtain information held by public authorities. So after the enactment or after the recognition of the right to receive information held by public authorities in the 19th Amendment, in 2016, the then government of Sri Lanka adopted the Right to Information Act. We should all have a copy of this law, which is very important to each one of us. Act number 12 of 2016. There it requires all public authorities and even certain private authorities which undertake services for the government and even non-governmental organizations which are serving the public to maintain records, old records for up to 10 years and any new records for up to 12 years, so that the public can access such information. And it is statutorily obligatory on the part of these institutions, particularly public institutions, to provide for the provision of information to any member of the public, any citizen. Actually, the right is guaranteed to any citizen who requests a specific piece of information. Now, the rule in the Act, as I see it, is providing information. That is the rule, not the exception. So as I said, the earlier cloak of secrecy that surrounded government was lifted decades ago, especially with the recognition of human rights at an international level. Democracy, kept advancing so that we could enjoy our freedoms and rights and demand greater accountability on the part of government. So here, the exceptions to providing information are mentioned in Section 5 of the Act. And one can say that they are rather expansive. But I think that while there are many grounds on which access to information can be denied, yet there is a provision which many of us agitated for when this law was being drafted, that any piece of information that is in the public interest, it says, notwithstanding the provisions of subsection 1, a request for information shall not be refused where the public interest in disclosing the information outweighs the harm that would result from its disclosure. Now, this is in Section 5, subsection 4. So we should be aware of this. So each public institution has to appoint information officers. And if an information officer does not provide requested information within 14 days or refuses to give such information, an appeal can be preferred to the designated officer of that institution. So all these appointments must be made available to the public. And then if the designated officer also turns it down, an appeal is available to the Right to Information Commission. So I think under the Right to Information Act, the establishment of this Right to Information Commission is also very important. It's a really important milestone in our march towards democracy. It's been a very difficult journey for all of us. as we recognized even in the recent past. But in that difficult journey, the establishment of the Right to Information Commission, I would think, stands out as a real goal mark, because our Right to Information Act, as well as the functioning of the Right to Information Commission thus far, is considered to be one of the best performances in the world. So that is something that we have to be proud of, and we have to continue to agitate to ensure that the Right to Information Commission gets the best possible commissioners who will act independently, non-politically, and who are aware of fundamental rights and who are committed to the cause of openness of government. That, openness, which is so absolutely important for accountable government. So after appealing to the Right to Information Commission, still if a party is aggrieved, one can go to the Court of Appeal to canvass the matter. So it does provide for several stages of examination and scrutiny if information is denied. So this is something very positive. It doesn't cost much money to access information other than the prescribed fee. And sometimes if a person cannot pay the fee, the act itself makes it possible to waive fees. So people who are poverty stricken, or maybe persons who are at that moment not in a position to pay the prescribed fee, can make an appeal to be exempted from the fee as well. So going to the commission also, in my opinion, does not require any legal representation. You can take anybody if you are not in a position to represent yourself, an administrative officer, a school teacher, a principal, anybody who understands the procedure to assist you. So these are landmarks in our march towards this difficult march towards democracy. And I think this is very much tied up with the protest movement that I am particularly very supportive of, and I know that millions of people in the country are very supportive of, which is, we commonly call it the Aragalaya, because the Aragalaya began as a movement, a people's movement, which arose spontaneously to demand, I think, in the main, accountable government that is responsible to the people, that acts in a responsible manner, listens to the people, and its decision-making must be open to public scrutiny. And the fact that this economic crisis that all of us are subjected to, and which has impoverished a large proportion of people in the country who have lost food security, amongst many other rights, was due to unaccountable government, has made the right to information all the more important in its practical significance. So this is very much tied up with this protest movement. And I think, therefore, we need to recognize that as citizens, we have this opportunity of seeking information from public authorities, and we should be very quick to use this or to exercise this right. And I must say, one is very pleased to note that according to the reports of the Right to Information Commission, large numbers of citizens of Sri Lanka have petitioned, have applied to receive information from public authorities for various purposes, for their own private purposes. Sometimes it may be about why a child was denied access to school, or why one was denied access or granting of a license to begin a business, to, in the public interest, to look scrutinizing governmental activities that affect the larger public. So I think this is very important. Now, there is a general sense that the right to information is important only for journalists. I don't think that is acceptable, but certainly right to information is a lifeline for journalists who have a very important role to play in a democracy, because without a well-informed and independent media, mass media, once again, it's impossible to have an effective democracy. So all around, the right to information is absolutely important. So celebrating this day, the International Day of Right to Information, some call it freedom of information, is absolutely of the essence, because, you know, if we are committed to democracy as a form of government, as the form of government which provides the best possible form of protection for our rights and overall well-being of the people, then we must celebrate these developments. So I think, despite the fact that Sri Lanka has many problems to really enjoy a democracy even at a reasonable level, yet amidst that dark picture, we have this very bright light, that is the recognition of freedom of information, and a specific piece of legislation that makes it possible for us to access information. And indeed, one can also petition the Supreme Court under the 19th Amendment, because if the 20th Amendment protected the right to information, to vindicate that right. So we have very many avenues to seek protection of the right to information. And I also want to say this, it is not only about our right to access information, but we as citizens of the country, whatever we do, wherever we serve, we must also act in the spirit of openness. Whether we work in a school, in a university, in a hospital, government department, ministry, whatever it may be, or even non-governmental organizations, we have to act in a spirit of openness. Not only think of our right to access information held by others, but to recognize that whatever we do in these institutions, we have to make information required by the public available to them. So I think we have to develop that quality of openness in our own activities, because sometimes we think that the government has to be open, but not any one of us. And that is wrong. We have to in our activities. So for example, I'm a university professor. In my dealings with my students, I have to be extremely open. You know, you of course, examination matters are recognized as a confidential matter under the Act as well. But when examination results are to be received, we have to share such information with the students as much as possible. So that has to be kept in mind, both the right to information as well as our obligation, certainly our duty as citizens to act in a open manner in whatever we do, particularly regarding our professional activities that are of interest to the public. So once again, I wish to thank the Forum for Development Journalists for this invitation. I think we, as citizens of this country, have to keep this conversation going. And as we, as citizens, are engaged in this protest movement to better enhance and deepen democracy in the country, that we pay a lot of attention to preserving and protecting the right to information, and also amongst ourselves have that spirit of openness. So thank you very much.